It started with whispers, quiet murmurs exchanged in empty dorm halls, under flickering lights, in libraries long after closing. Students spoke of a club, harmless, academic, a place to debate ethics, philosophy, and law. But the truth was far darker. They called themselves the Midnight Society. And what they studied was human darkness. From petty crimes to meticulously planned heists, from moral puzzles to real-life experiments, their games blurred the line between theory and reality. And at the center of it all, a man whose charm hid a chilling obsession with control. One notebook. Endless schemes. Lives changed forever. This is the story of the Midnight Society, and the terror they left behind. It began with whispers. Quiet, careful murmurs. Words exchanged across dormitory halls, under flickering fluorescent lights, in libraries just as they were closing. "Have you heard about the Midnight Society?" someone would ask. The other person would shake their head, eyes wide, almost afraid to speak too loudly. At first, it sounded harmless. A college debate club, they said. A place to discuss politics, philosophy, morality, and law. That was the story they told the administration, the parents, even some of the more naive students who stumbled across a flyer tucked in a corner of the student union. But what the Midnight Society really was, no one could have imagined. It started on a rainy Thursday in late September, when Rachel Whitman, a third-year philosophy major, wandered into a lecture hall for a meeting she thought was about Kantian ethics. She was late, of course, and the room smelled faintly of old coffee and pine air freshener. Half a dozen students were already seated, notebooks open, pens poised. At the front stood a young man with a shock of dark hair and a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. He introduced himself as Adrian Crowe. Adrian had a way of speaking that made you lean in. It wasn't just confidence, it was subtle insistence that the world you thought you knew wasn't really the world at all. He spoke about morality as a puzzle, not an abstract concept. He spoke about laws as rules that could be tested, bent, or broken. Rachel, like everyone else in that room, was intrigued. She didn't realize, not yet, that the society wasn't about debating ideas, it was about practicing them. The first exercise was subtle. Adrian passed around a notebook, small and black, leather-bound, with pages that smelled faintly of wax and iron. Inside were scenarios, hypothetical crimes, crimes that existed only on paper. Or so they were supposed to. Imagine, Adrian said, you have the perfect alibi, the perfect crime. You could take anything, anyone, and the law would never touch you. How would you do it? The room buzzed with nervous energy. Some students scribbled notes furiously. Others, like Rachel, hesitated. There was a thrill in the idea, a dangerous kind of curiosity that made her stomach clench. They all agreed it was theoretical, at least, that's what they told themselves. Weeks passed. Meetings became regular. They convened in basements, empty classrooms, sometimes in the abandoned observatory at the edge of campus. The topics evolved. At first, it was petty crimes, thefts, pranks, small acts of mischief that were barely criminal. But as the semester deepened, so did their ambitions. Adrian had a methodical mind, and he guided discussions with precision. He had charts. He had notes on police response times, security camera blind spots, the psychology of witnesses. He talked about crimes as if they were strategy games, and the students, slowly, began to play along. By late October, the first crime happened. It was a convenience store robbery, unarmed and small-scale, executed late at night by one of the society members, a sophomore named Jordan. He volunteered, claiming it was for research. Adrian watched, calm and composed, as the plan unfolded exactly as discussed. They analyzed it afterward, not as a matter of guilt, but as a case study. What went wrong, what went right, the response time, the cashier's reactions, they dissected it with academic rigor. Rachel left that meeting shaking. She told herself she wouldn't come back, that it was too much. But curiosity and the pull of belonging were stronger than her caution. By the next week, she was back. By the month's end, she was taking notes herself, mapping out scenarios, debating tactics. What made the Midnight Society terrifying wasn't just their detachment, it was their methodical approach to human behavior. Adrian studied members like experiments. He noted who would hesitate, who would rationalize, who would panic. The leather-bound notebook grew thicker. Pages were torn out, replaced, rewritten, each scenario more audacious than the last. The crimes escalated. Burglaries. Vandalism. Identity theft. They avoided being caught, of course, because Adrian insisted on precision. Every move was calculated. Every witness accounted for. Every digital trail minimized. They were clever, organized, and detached. Rachel began to notice changes in herself. Nights she spent awake, replaying scenarios in her head. Friends she once trusted now seemed like props in her private studies of human behavior. She started keeping a small notebook herself, documenting reactions, noting patterns. But unlike Adrian, she still felt the tug of conscience, a hesitation that made her stomach twist. Then came the winter. The society had planned a mock heist that was, in reality, a test. Adrian had chosen a target carefully, a small jewelry store in the center of town, closed for renovations. They arrived late, masks and gloves in place. Rachel's hands trembled as she lifted the latch. Inside, the display cases were empty. The point wasn't the haul. It was the execution. They moved with precision, documented every step, timed their entries and exits. And then the alarm went off. It wasn't supposed to. Adrian's plans were meticulous. But one detail had been overlooked, a temporary sensor left active. Panic surged. Rachel froze. Others ran. Adrian stayed calm, issuing rapid instructions, guiding them through contingency plans they hadn't even practiced. The police arrived within minutes, but the group had vanished into the night. The aftermath was unsettling. No arrests. No evidence. The police dismissed it as an attempted burglary, teenagers testing boundaries. But the Midnight Society learned something crucial that night: imperfection was part of the game, and it made the experience intoxicating. From that point on, the crimes became bolder, more personal. They didn't just steal, they manipulated. They staged accidents. They pranked law enforcement, planting clues that led nowhere. Adrian called it stress-testing reality. Others called it reckless. But in the society, it was strategy. Every act was a lesson. Every lesson a thrill. Rachel's moral compass began to fracture. She justified everything in her mind. It was research. It was intellectual exploration. They weren't hurting anyone, at least, that's what she told herself. But she started noticing small details she couldn't explain. A look of fear in someone's eyes that felt too real. A broken lock where someone had been trapped inside. A voicemail left on a phone she wasn't sure belonged to a willing participant. And then came the night that changed everything. They had been planning for weeks. Adrian had chosen a new challenge, something that tested the boundaries of fear itself. He called it the experiment. It involved a student who had discovered their society and posed a potential risk. They would stage a kidnapping, ensuring no real harm, Adrian assured them. It was the ultimate theoretical exercise. Rachel's stomach sank. Something about it felt different. More dangerous. More real. But Adrian framed it as an intellectual puzzle. If they could navigate this scenario, they would understand human behavior like never before. They would be untouchable. The plan unfolded on a foggy night. Masks, silent movements, careful placement of evidence, surveillance of the victim. Rachel followed orders, hands shaking. The student, bound but unharmed, was moved to a safe house. And then, something went wrong. A single detail, overlooked, spiraled out of control. The victim panicked. Screams echoed. A neighbor called the police. In minutes, the quiet suburb erupted with sirens. Adrian's meticulous planning failed for the first time. Members scattered, some hiding in shadows, others fleeing in cars. Rachel stayed frozen, paralyzed with fear. When the police arrived, they found nothing, except the notebook. Black, leather-bound, pages spilling over with calculations, plans, and confessions written in meticulous hand. The authorities pieced together what they could. Arrests were made. Some members cooperated, others vanished. Adrian Crowe was never caught. He disappeared as suddenly as he had arrived, leaving only the echo of his presence, the black notebook, and a series of crimes that would haunt the campus for years. Rachel watched it all unravel, her life forever altered. She realized, too late, the true nature of the Midnight Society. It wasn't just a debate club. It wasn't just intellectual curiosity. It was a study of human darkness, and she had been an unwilling participant. Years later, the society remains a ghost in campus lore. Students whisper of it during late-night walks. Alumni tell stories with nervous chuckles, never quite meeting each other's eyes. And somewhere out there, Adrian Crowe waits. Perhaps teaching again, perhaps watching, always orchestrating, always curious. Rachel sometimes thinks of the notebook, black and heavy, tucked away in police evidence, the words frozen on the page but alive in memory. She wonders if anyone will ever read it and understand the extent of what happened. And she wonders if, in some corner of the world, the Midnight Society has started again, quietly, with new members, new crimes, and a new moral puzzle to solve. Because the thing about monsters is this, they don't announce themselves. They don't wear warning signs. They sit quietly in the room next to you, discussing ethics, debating morality, planning carefully, and smiling when no one is watching. And sometimes, if you listen closely at midnight, you can still hear them whisper.